Hey guys, I'm Ted. I'm here to give you another lecture, and for this lecture, we are going to continue to talk about the social changes that were occurring in the late 1800s, late 19th century. In our last lecture, we discussed the rise of the YMCA, which was created as one of the major throngs, one of the major endeavors and social campaigns of the masculine Christianity movement. We also discussed the opening, the broadening of professions to women, most notably teaching profession, the profession of teaching. A lot of women became primary or early education educators. Many became nurses, and even more became secretaries to the great industrialist monopolies. And with that being said, I'd like to dive right into the lecture at hand for today, continuing with our discussion on masculine Christianity. So, Luther Glick, he was a major proponent of masculine Christianity. He also was a major supporter of the YMCA. And he helped to invent and popularize the sports of basketball and volleyball. He also came up with, and he also served as a YMCA spokesman, who came up with the idea to use spokes to popularize those sports. It was very revolutionary at the time. Not only the creation of those sports, but also the whole concept of using spokesmen to popularize sports or to popularize something. And to do this, they targeted the popular and athletic male students in an effort to popularize Christianity. Now, muscular or masculine Christianity had several advocates. Chief amongst them was Amos Alonzo Stagg, who would later go on to become the famous coach at the University of Chicago. Rockefeller's old endeavor, his old philanthropic endeavor. Now, Stagg was a proponent of masculine Christianity out and about. He was the man who first thought of putting numbers on football jerseys, and Stagg was also the person to come up with the concept of the forward pass in football, in American football. Stagg graduated from Yale School of Divinity, but he made a career out of coaching football, and he wanted to really Christianize and moralize sports and young athletes. Now, Theodore Roosevelt was also a very firm supporter of masculine Christianity. In his childhood, Roosevelt had been a very frail boy. He suffered from a number of illnesses, and through sheer force of will, he overcame his fragility. He boxed, he hunted, and he became a noted cattle rancher in the Dakota Badlands, and even a military leader for a brief period during the Spanish-American War, winning some acclaim for himself at the Battle of San Juan Hill. Now, female reformers were tempted to use the ideas of the gender divide for their own benefit. Women such as Clara Barton used this approach during the United States Civil War. Clara Barton actually insisted that that wounded soldiers call her mother. She thought it was a very fitting. She thought it was very fitting that wounded soldiers who needed the most care needed their mother. She tried to link mother and a mother's care to what she was doing. The Women's Christian Temperance Union, or WCTU, was the first organization to really bring in large numbers of women into political or public advocacy work. And now the Temperance at first was the belief that you should only drink in moderate amounts, but later temperance became a movement devoted to abstaining from alcohol completely. Now, the WCTU also worked towards abolishing alcohol consumption altogether. Frances Willard was one of the early leaders of the WCTU, and she tried to assuage the fears of potential supporters who might have been indifferent or even resentful to a woman taking a more public role in society. she would have her speaking engagements begin with a children's choir singing what were known as temperance songs or temperance ditties. She would also recreate a home atmosphere with furniture and plants strategically placed. But before she took the stage and began speaking, she wanted to create a very home-like atmosphere wherever she went, to sort of tie in potential supporters to sort of lay their fears aside. Now, the white life, Barton. Barton was a really enigmatic woman. Barton also promoted what was known as the white life. Now, the white life was a campaign to do away with the sexual double standard. Back then, it was widely accepted that men and women were very different as far as their sexual attitudes and their sexual natures were concerned. It was widely accepted that men were more sexually promiscuous and sexually aggressive, while women were more shy when it came to matters about sex. It was widely assumed that women shrank away from sex. Francis Willard was under the impression that the whole society was over-sexualized, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that she did not know just how correct she was. This is a time period in which some of the more interesting finds would be Civil War caches of early pornography, and of course the early sexual devices such as imitation wood and phalluses. So she's kind of hitting the nail right on the head, but not really in a manner that she even knew. Her aim, Frances Willard's aim, was to get men to pledge to abstain from premarital sex. That sex itself should only be should become really unimportant, and should only really be used for procreation purposes. Now, men who wanted to join the white life could do so. They could join the Society of the White Cross. And boys, of course, boys who wanted to join could have joined the Knights of the Silver Crown. Those were two social fraternal orders that she had created. And these two orders were designed to introduce the idea of celibacy to young men. Willard, Frances Willard, and all of these things, to continue this sort of enigmatic reputation that she had, this sort of really hard for me to describe it, but she continued all of this by linking alcohol consumption to marital rape. She painted this picture, a very illustrative picture, very clear picture of drunken brutes forcing themselves on their wives. And she countered that if men were sober, spousal rape would decline. She also said that spousal rape led to idiot or mentally impaired children. So again, we can see people with very inquisitive natures, but not a very firm understanding of what's going on. The idea behind this thinking was that the child could be influenced by the condition of the parents at the time of conception. The white life had great appeal in the 19th century. The number of women who died during childbirth was extremely high. Deaths during childbirth cut across class and ethnic lines. It didn't really matter who you were. A famous example of this would be Theodore Roosevelt's first wife. His first wife died in childbirth. And again, the Roosevelts, both Theodore Roosevelt and his first wife Alice, they both came from very wealthy families. It was iron cutting iron, had they said back in those days, and yet she died very young in childbirth. Devastated Theodore Roosevelt, led to very strained relationships between him and his daughter, because his daughter, also named Alice, resembled her mother. Extreme resemblance between the two of them. Very, very, very strong resemblance. Now, Carrie Nation was perhaps the most outlandish and successful of these early temperance leaders. Carrie Nation, and she was a big woman, a very big, very powerful, very intuitive, and very shrewd woman. She took a more direct path towards advocating temperance. She was known to bust into bars and to just start breaking bottles. She even carried an axe she would use, and she used this axe at times to simply smash up bar counters and to smash up bar bottles. And of course, nobody would go in near her while she was swinging that axe. She was arrested, of course, for her actions. But Miss Nation, Carrie Nation understood that she would receive publicity and develop a cult following for her actions, and she expertly exploited the circumstances for her benefits, for her gain. She even took the fateful steps of hiring a publicist to assist her, and wherever she went, there will be cameras, there will be reporters, there will be admirers there to track her, to track all of her movement. Now, the women's suffragette movement, while not as large as the temperance movement, and a lot of people are really shocked to find out that the suffragettes did not gain as much support as the temperance women, but the suffragettes still played a very vital role in shaping their time and later our time. They were devoted to attaining political rights. They argued that politics would benefit from a woman's perspective, of the female perspective, just as many other aspects of family life. Many of the early suffragettes had been supportive of abolition as well, and many were really angered by the 15th Amendment, which gave voting rights to African American men, but not to any other woman. They spoke very frequently of improving the quality of political life. The suffragette movement had better success in the western states and territories than it did in the east. In fact, Wyoming in 1869 granted voting rights to women within the territory. And this was followed up by Colorado, Utah, and Idaho, who also gave women the right to vote. Now, many of the suffragettes, as I stated earlier, were abolitionists, and many of them broke with supporting the African American community, and many of them simply didn't support the 15th Amendment, not because they had developed any sort of racist tendencies or racist feelings. They broke with it because there was this mutual sort of betrayal felt by both groups. Many of them have been friends with leaders like Frederick Douglass, and Douglass supported he supported female suffrage, but Douglass took the position that they needed to approach this slowly and systematically. He called one for the immediate end to slavery, abolition, and then for voting rights, and then after getting voting rights for black men, they would move towards addressing the female rights. As a matter of fact, the first time that a female was nominated for president, Frederick Douglass was nominated as the vice president. So Douglass still retained appeal there, but a number of them were very upset, very upset that Douglass showed his support for the 15th Amendment, even though it did not address female suffrage. And a number of them broke with Douglass, and it was a very traumatic, very ugly affair within these activists that many of them sort of just split from each other over the 15th Amendment. And also Vassar College. I want to mention Vassar College. And again, during this time, education for women, education for females was viewed upon with suspicion. It was highly feared that education would make women mentally unstable. Ludicrous for us to understand today. Mostly, there are some people even today who would claim that educating women made them mentally unstable. But especially back then, many people were under the impression that it was a bad idea, that it was something that should not be encountered. The early advocates of women higher education, therefore, needed to be careful. Matthew Vassar, the founder of Vassar College, believed that women education could be possible under specific circumstances. He made sure that the curriculum was not too difficult, not too taxing for his students. He also made sure that the students were regularly chaperoned at all intervals during the day. These gender roles did have some unintended consequences, but let me just say that Vassar, that it was that his measures seem very ridiculous and very kind of draconian to us now, but this was the only way to sort of assuage the communal fears. You had this large number of women, large numbers of girls. The community was they're going to be mentally unstable if they go there, so we can't really throw too much pressure on them. And then two, it was, you have this large number of women there. White slave trade was something that was thrown out there, that if you went there, you would be taken and sold into slavery. That is sex slavery, that you may be sent to African American men to be exploited. It was a lot of fear mongering amongst educated women, or even sending women to be educated. Now, the next generation of women who grew up, they challenged this. They challenged these notions. They challenged these ideas. They challenged these expectations for the social roles and behavior of women. Women like Jane Addams. Jane Addams would go on to pioneer the settlement houses in an attempt to integrate immigrant women into American or United States life. She did this because they lived in an urban setting, and most of the women, as I stated earlier in our discussion on immigrants, most of them lived in rural areas. Where we're coming from, rural areas. Margaret Sanger is another. Margaret Sanger was an outspoken advocate for sex education. She really had an openness and a frankness regarding sex. It was almost like a precursor to Dr. Ruth, if you're familiar with Dr. Ruth. Margaret Sanger's great passion was in spreading information regarding contraceptives, and she really wanted to spread them to immigrant families. Not only because pregnancy was what was still looked at as a 50-50 death sentence, but also because many of these immigrant families needed contraceptives because they weren't able to adequately care for themselves because of their low menial jobs. But they also really couldn't afford to have someone, take the time off because of pregnancy. They needed all hands to be on deck to earn wages. But Sanger, that was Sanger's main passion, and she had to overcome what were known as the Comstock laws. Now, the Comstock laws were a series of laws that Anthony Comstock, a reformer, much like Francis Willard, had put into place. Comstock believed that there was too much sex in the world, and he influenced Congress to pass a series of laws. These laws prohibited the sending of information regarding sexual health through the mail. Now, all of these events that we've discussed over the past two lectures really helped to contribute to the breakdown of the Victorian ideas of womanhood. And again, we were harkening back to the true cult of womanhood. Those ideas related to the true cult of womanhood were broken down, and it allowed for this modern interpretation of women's rights and a modern interpretation of the capabilities, of the social capabilities, of the intellectual capabilities, of the broad scale view of women that we have now to sort of emerge. It's very jarring. It's very difficult for a lot of people to read about, that to read about the way in which women were viewed. And I'll just taper off and end it there. As always, hit like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you thought about this lecture. And as always, I'm Ted, and I'll see you guys next time for another lecture.